If you offered me the choice between wearing this or my Apple Watch Ultra day and night for the next year, which one would I choose? Well, after wearing this little thing pretty much every day for the last several months, I'm not sure the answer is as straightforward as you might think, because the Apple Watch does a lot of things very well, but it's also quite bulky, and even the Ultra model still needs charging more often. And this is the Ultrahuman Ring AIR, a shockingly light ring which can track almost all the same vitals as my watch, and I've been wearing it for several months to see what it's actually like to live with. But before we get into it, this Ring AIR was sent to me free for review, but Ultrahuman are not paying me to say any of this, and these are my own thoughts after using it day to day. And in my case, I think I've found a pretty interesting distinction between what a smart ring does well and what a smart watch does well. So let's take a closer look. Hi, I'm James, and I've been building out my smart home for years, with products from just about every manufacturer out there, figuring out what works and what doesn't. So if you've somehow managed to avoid the recent explosion in popularity of smart rings, the basic idea is pretty simple. This is a health tracker that you wear on your finger instead of on your wrist. And because there's no screen, buttons, no notifications coming directly to the ring, and basically nothing to interact with, it can just sit there and collect data. Ultrahuman says that the Ring AIR weighs between 2.4 and 3.6 grams, depending on the size, and it's rated for between 4 and 6 days of battery life. And after several months of using it, I'd say those battery figures have held up pretty well. There is a catch though. You have got several different modes depending on whether you want to prioritize your battery life or how frequently the ring syncs its data to your phone. I found that the more energy efficient mode gets pretty close to what Ultrahuman claims, but personally I prefer the more data rich mode. Now that does mean charging it a bit more often, but I'd personally rather have the extra data available more quickly and then just put it on the charger when I get in the shower, when I remember. And that's one of the big advantages of this ring. It really doesn't feel like you're wearing a piece of technology, so I do often forget to take it off and charge it in those windows of opportunity. Now for sleep, that's where I think this ring really starts to shine. See, I wear an Apple Watch Ultra, which is the larger model, and I personally have no trouble sleeping with it. But a ring is just more comfortable. There's no screen lighting up when you roll over, there's no watch body pressing against your wrist, and there's no strap. And because it's so small and light, once you've got used to wearing it, you basically forget that it's there, like any other ring. And that's perhaps the most important thing for something like this, because the whole point of these devices is to collect data continuously. The less annoying the device is to wear, the more likely you are to actually keep wearing it. And the Ultrahuman app gives you a ridiculous amount of information about your sleep. You get your sleep stages, heart rate variability, temperature, recovery, movement, stress, and a whole load of other things that it tries to turn into something useful. And one of the things that I've particularly liked is when that data picks up on something that I can correlate with what I actually did that day. As an example, this is a screenshot where the ring picked up an unusually high heart rate during the night. Now I knew exactly why, but crucially the ring took a damn good guess as to why all by itself. I'd had a fairly substantial Indian meal that evening, and despite not eating particularly late, my heart rate was noticeably elevated while I was sleeping, trying to digest it all. And that's the sort of thing that I do actually find quite interesting, because that's not just a number that I have to interpret myself. It's giving me something that I can look at and go, oh yeah, that's probably what happened. And over time, I think that's where this sort of tracking becomes properly useful. So why do I still wear my Apple Watch? Because if you are thinking of buying one of these instead of an Apple Watch, I wouldn't look at it as a straight replacement. For working out, for example, I still much prefer wearing my watch. If I'm going for a run or cycling, doing something where I want live data on my wrist, the Apple Watch is miles more useful. I get much more frequent readings, I've got GPS, a screen where I can respond to notifications, and somewhat surprisingly, there is another advantage to the watch. If you're doing something where you need to grip something, the ring can get a little bit uncomfortable. And I've noticed this particularly when I'm working out and using free weights or a Smith's bar down in our gym. I wouldn't quite call it uncomfortable, but there are definitely times where I'd rather have the tracker on my wrist and out of the way. So for workouts, it's definitely still a win for the watch. But for just going about my day, that's where I'm increasingly convinced the Ring makes more sense. And then there's the Ultrahuman app, which incidentally looked completely different when I started testing this compared to what you'll see now. Because in typical fashion during the months that I've been testing this thing, Ultrahuman completely overhauled their app. So some of the images that you're seeing in this video are from the old version and some are from the new one. But the basic idea is exactly the same. You get all of your health data broken down into different sections, and then Ultrahuman tries to turn all of those individual measurements into things that you can actually act on. And I like that approach, but there are a couple of things about the app that have driven me slightly mad. Their app is incredibly notification happy. I think I was getting on average at least 5 notifications a day from their app, and many of them were useful, but after a while I found myself just dismissing them immediately because there were just so many. What I'd personally really like is much finer control over the different notifications. For example, I'd quite happily have a morning summary or perhaps something in the evening telling me how my day went. But I personally don't really want my phone constantly telling me that something has changed or what phase of the day that I'm in. And the annoying thing is that I couldn't really achieve that in the way that I wanted. So in the end, I just turned notifications off from their app altogether, which feels like a bit of a shame because I would have liked to keep some of them, as I said. And here's another area where I think the Ultrahuman app could do much better. See, the Ring Air puts a huge amount of information into Apple Health, which is great, but it doesn't seem to read all of that back out again. And that becomes a bit of a problem when you're already using Apple Health as your central place for your health information. For example, I've got a shortcut on my phone which records my caffeine intake in Apple Health, and that's linked into the same shortcut that I use to send coffees to my Jura coffee machine. So Apple Health already knows how much caffeine I've had just by me telling my machine to make a coffee. But Ultrahuman doesn't seem to make proper use of that information. They have their own caffeine intake section in their app, but they won't read data from anyone else's. And I'm not going to open another app every time I've had a coffee just to manually tell it that I've had caffeine, when, as far as I'm concerned, I've already tracked it automatically. The data is already there, Ultrahuman, please just use it. And speaking of automatically doing things with this data, this is the part of the video where things get particularly interesting for me, because it turns out there's an Ultrahuman integration for Home Assistant. I think it's a hacks integration which someone in the community has built rather than an official one, but it is there and it works. And that means that you can put a whole load of this health data into Home Assistant and use it in your automations. So suddenly your smart home can know things about your sleep data, recovery, and any of the other metrics from this ring. But there is one pretty major limitation, unfortunately. The data is not very fast to update at all. We're talking on the order of hours. So I wouldn't be using this to trigger something where I need a response immediately. You won't be able to use it to launch your wake-up routine, but for something like a morning automation where Home Assistant could look at how well you slept the night before when the data refreshes and then tell me about it at that point, well, then there's something genuinely interesting and probably a good enough replacement for the notifications that I no longer get from the app. If it doesn't work how you want it, build it yourself. And I'm planning to play around more with that data, so if I find another interesting use case for that integration, I will be sure to let you guys know. And because this is me, I also tried to use the Ring for something it clearly wasn't designed to do. I had a go at using it as a Bluetooth room tracker within Home Assistant, and initial results were promising. I was able to add it and Home Assistant could see that it was here in my study, but as soon as I took the Ring off the charger, it stopped behaving like a useful Bluetooth tracker, presumably not sending out the announcements that were required. So unfortunately that experiment was a bust, but it was worth trying and mentioning in case you plan to replace your watch with a Ring for this type of use case. And there is one other thing that I feel I should talk about because it happened at a rather unfortunate time during this review process. As I was working on this, Ultrahuman disclosed that they did have a data breach. I won't go into too much detail, you can read their announcement about it and make up your own mind. But according to the email that they sent out to users, an unauthorized party gained read-only access to an internal system used for internal analytics. But I think it's important to mention this because when you're wearing something that is collecting this much information about you, security and privacy are a real concern. And all this brings us back to the original question. Could the Ultrahuman Ring AIR replace my Apple Watch Ultra? Personally, not for me. But I don't think that that is really the right question. The Apple Watch is still the device that I'd want on my wrist when I'm exercising and need GPS or live information, or when I need all the other things that this smartwatch can do. But the Ring AIR is better at being something that I can just wear all the time and get data from. And especially when I'm sleeping, even I prefer it. It's tiny, super light, very comfortable, and it doesn't have a screen demanding my attention. Plus, after several months of wearing it, I found the data really quite useful in adjusting my habits. There are definitely things that I would change. I'd really like more granular control over notifications, and I'd like it to make better use of the data that's already in Apple Health from other sources. But those are all things around the experience rather than the core idea of the device. And I think that that's the interesting thing that I've learned from using it. I don't think smart rings are necessarily going to replace smart watches. I think they're a different thing and they're going to sit alongside them. The watch is the device for people like me who want to interact more easily with technology. The ring is the device for people who want to forget that they're even wearing a bit of tech. And so for tracking what your body is doing 24 hours a day, that can be a pretty compelling difference. If you would like to pick one of these up, the link will as always be in the description below and over on my website. And if you purchase one using my link, I'll earn a small commission at no cost to you, so thanks for supporting the channel. And finally, I want to say a big thank you to my mid-tier or higher channel members whose names are on screen now. As you probably know, these memberships also help support the monthly channel member giveaway, where I give away smart home gear including WLED controllers, relays, smart bulbs, locks, and other bits and pieces that I've got in my bucket of tech. So if you are interested in supporting the channel and getting involved in that giveaway, there's a link below or at the top of my website. Thank you, as always, again for watching, and remember, home is where the smart is.